What does it cost a man to sit in silence and be left alone? For General Malcolm Reed, it almost cost him his life. It began like any ordinary afternoon in the heart of Somerset Ridge, a city known more for its charm than its justice. The breeze was soft, the streets golden in sunlight, and inside the Baystone Cafe, the hum of clinking glasses and low jazz whispered of peace. Malcolm wasn't a man looking for trouble. He had worn the uniform of his country for 37 years, led troops across deserts, sat at tables where life and death were weighed like coin, and now, in retirement, all he wanted was to sit by a window and eat in peace. But the badge didn't see peace. The badge saw a threat. Chief Ronan Briggs, a man intoxicated by the sound of his own boots on polished floors, walked into that cafe not knowing the history stitched into Malcolm's spine. He didn't see a decorated general. He saw an older black man in his seat. And in that single moment, when pride met dignity and authority crashed into restraint, a city's soul was tested. The cafe grew still. The room leaned in, and phones began to record. Chief Briggs raised his voice. General Reed stayed seated. Briggs threatened. Reed refused to flinch. And when a weapon was drawn, upholstered not against violence, but against presence itself, it wasn't rage that answered. It was poise. It was courage. It was everything Malcolm Reed had ever been trained to be. What happened inside that quiet cafe rippled far beyond its walls. It awakened the city, shattered a career, and exposed just how fragile power becomes when it's built on fear. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to welcome you all to Life Stories by Rhea, a journey of thrilling stories that uncovers truth, character, and the power of real justice. Here, we uncover the secrets that have been buried and expose the raw realities of life. If you are new here, don't make it your last. Join us every day as we bring you stories and voices that matter to your screen, with twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification, because every click from you encourages us to do better. Don't click away yet. Watch this till the end. Like the video, share it with someone, because the story you are about to watch will not just teach you how to handle certain situations in life. It will also remind you that true power doesn't shout. It stands still. To our returning subscribers, thank you so much for being here. You bring dignity and voice to every story we share here. Now, let's get to the good part. The sun that afternoon draped the streets of Somerset Ridge in a gentle, forgiving gold. The kind of light that softened sharp edges and made even worn-out sidewalks look inviting. You could smell magnolia in the breeze, hear the flutter of leaves dancing along the gutters, and for a moment, it almost felt like peace had a pulse. Inside the Baystone Cafe, that peace was real. Glassware tinkled. Low laughter rippled from a booth near the kitchen. And the jazz, a lazy, mellow trumpet, flowed like warm honey from the ceiling speakers. The kind of day where nothing big should happen. The kind of day a man like General Malcolm Reed had come to treasure. He wasn't wearing his uniform. Those days were behind him. But there was something in his posture, something in the way his shoulders sat back and his chin never dipped, that told the truth. He didn't need medals to make people pay attention. He pushed open the door to the cafe, nodding to familiar chime overhead. The scent hit him first: warm biscuits, roasted garlic, fried catfish. It took him back to his childhood kitchen in rural Georgia, back to the days before the war, before the salutes, before the silence that followed every mission. Behind the host stand stood Tasha, barely out of college but always sharp. Her smile widened the second she saw him.
Afternoon, General Reed. Want your window seat?
Malcolm nodded with the ease of someone who didn't need much. Yes, ma'am. Just me today. The corner seat wasn't just a habit. It was a ritual. From there, he could see the street, the cafe, the entrance. Always situationally aware, even in retirement. Some instincts never leave a soldier. He moved with deliberate grace, one hand brushing the back of each chair as he passed, as if he were still leading a squad. His gray overcoat hung loose on his frame, but the man underneath was still built like he could hold a line. He sat down and folded his napkin across his lap. The glass of water on the table caught the light just right, and for a second, the sparkle reminded him of desert mirages.
Good to see you, General.
came a voice behind him. Devin, the young waiter with too much energy and not enough balance, nearly dropped the menu as he arrived. Malcolm chuckled softly. Good to see you too, son. Let's do baked salmon today. And sweet tea, light on the ice.
You got it.
As Devin hurried away, Malcolm leaned back, let his eyes wander out the window. People moved like they had time. A woman pushed a stroller past a flower stand. A teenage boy helped an elderly man cross the street. The ordinary was beautiful, and today he had time to notice. He hadn't always. For over 3 decades, his meals had been cold, eaten in tents, bunkers, sometimes not at all. Meals had been something to get through, not something to savor. But now, in this small town with its slow rhythms and quiet people, he was learning again, learning to breathe. He took a sip of tea, closed his eyes for just a moment, and then the door opened again. It wasn't the bell that changed the atmosphere. It was the sound of boots. Heavy, stomping, unnecessary. The music didn't stop, but it faded in presence, drowned out by the stomp of state-issued entitlement. For plainclothes officers entered first, eyes sweeping the cafe with mechanical precision. Then came Chief Ronan Briggs. Malcolm didn't turn around. Not yet, but he felt him. Broad-shouldered, thick-necked, carrying his ego like a weapon. His footsteps weren't just loud, they were deliberate, like a challenge issued with every step. Malcolm exhaled once, slowly, and picked up his glass again. Briggs had the look of a man who'd never been told no, and never reacted well when he finally was. His badge gleamed under the cafe lights. His jaw was tight, clenched. His eyes were already scanning tables, like a predator looking for its meal. Then those eyes landed on Malcolm. The chief's head tilted slightly, lips parting, not in surprise but irritation. He didn't walk to the host stand. He didn't speak to anyone. He simply marched forward. Malcolm set his glass down. "Tasha," someone whispered behind the counter. She didn't respond. Her eyes were frozen on Briggs. The cafe had grown quieter. Forks paused midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. It wasn't just curiosity. It was tension. The kind of tension people recognize deep in their bones. When something's wrong, but no one knows yet how bad it's going to get. Briggs stopped in front of Malcolm's table. "You're in my seat," he said flatly. Malcolm didn't look up immediately. He let the moment hang, let the weight of it gather like thunderclouds before a storm. Then he met Briggs's eyes. "I wasn't aware it was reserved." "It's not," Briggs snapped, leaning forward. "But it's mine." Malcolm blinked once, slowly. "Well, if it's not written down, I suppose we're all equal here, aren't we?" A nervous chuckle escaped from a booth nearby. Briggs heard it. His eyes twitched. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, voice low and laced with venom. "This is my city. I don't need a reservation. People know." "Then perhaps today is a good day for people to stop assuming," Malcolm said calmly. Briggs stood straighter, puffing his chest like a rooster preparing for war. "You try and make a scene?" "No," Malcolm replied, still seated. "But you walked up to my table, Chief. If there's a scene happening, it didn't start with me." Briggs's face darkened. His hands hovered dangerously close to his belt. Malcolm saw the twitch. So did a few others. "You don't belong here," Briggs hissed. "And what kind of people do belong, Chief?" Malcolm asked, his voice still even. "Those who carry weapons, or those who carry themselves?" That was it. The entire cafe was still now. Even the jazz had stopped meaning anything. Malcolm slowly unfolded his napkin again and placed it gently in his lap. Across the room, Devin peeked out from the kitchen, wide-eyed. Phones began to rise. One man whispered to his wife, "Should we leave?" "No," she said, gripping her purse. "He's not doing anything wrong." And Malcolm, still in his chair, still calm, lifted his chin and said with clarity, "If you're trying to intimidate me, you'll have to get in line behind real enemies." Briggs didn't blink. His jaw twitched. And that's when the mood in the cafe shifted, from discomfort to danger. And no one knew just how far this would go. Chief Ronan Briggs wasn't used to being questioned. Not by his officers. Not by the city council. And certainly not by an old man sitting calmly in a window seat with sweet tea and discipline in his bones. His breath was growing sharper now, shorter, heavier, not from effort, but from something worse, ego. He stared at General Malcolm Reed, scanning for a crack in the man's composure. But there was nothing, no fear, no stammer, not even a raised voice. Just stillness, like a mountain waiting for the wind to wear itself out. Briggs shifted his weight. His boots squeaked against the cafe floor. Behind him, the hush had deepened. The staff had stopped moving. The customers had stopped chewing. The entire cafe was now a theater of tension, and the two men at center stage weren't actors. They were opposites, one trembling with threatened pride, the other anchored in something deeper. "You think this is a game?" Briggs asked, jaw clenched. Malcolm looked out the window again, as if searching the quiet street for the answer. Then he turned back slowly. "No, but you seem to think power is something you're owed, not something you earn." A woman at the back table gasped quietly. Briggs's hand twitched at his side again, hovering near the badge clipped to his belt. Then just below it, his knuckles flexed, his eyes narrowed. He was no longer trying to reclaim the seat. He was trying to reclaim control. "You trying to embarrass me in front of my city?" he growled. "I don't need to embarrass you," Malcolm replied evenly. "You're doing that just fine on your own." The silence was deafening now. And then Briggs slammed both hands flat on the table. The silverware jumped. The water in Malcolm's glass rippled. Someone near the counter let out a small cry, and a phone, unnoticed till now, started recording. From the corner booth, a young man in an Air Force hoodie raised his phone just high enough to capture the scene. The red blinked, live streaming. Malcolm didn't react to the slamming. He didn't flinch or raise his voice. He simply reached for his napkin again and wiped a non-existent speck from his fingers. "You wear that badge like it makes you invincible," he said softly. "But today, Chief, it's just making you loud." Briggs's face flushed crimson. He looked around the cafe, at the eyes now watching him, the cameras silently filming him. The weight of it began to land. He wasn't just losing the confrontation. He was losing the room. And yet he couldn't stop. "This isn't your place," he said, his voice cracking with restraint. "This city, this seat, this moment, it doesn't belong to you." Malcolm stood then. He didn't do it aggressively. He didn't rise like a man preparing for battle. He rose like someone simply tired of sitting. At full height, he stood eye level with Briggs, and something shifted. Malcolm was taller, not by inches, but by presence. Briggs felt it. Everyone did. He tried to hide the jolt of insecurity behind a sneer. "I gave you a chance," he muttered. "You could have just moved." Malcolm adjusted the lapel of his coat. "I did move. Forward. You think this is courage?" Briggs spat. "You think people are going to side with you because you sat here and played hero in front of a couple of Soft City folks?" "I didn't sit here to make a point," Malcolm said. "But since you're determined to create one, let me help you sharpen it." He stepped a half-inch closer. Not threatening, not reckless, just steady. "You didn't ask," Malcolm continued. "You commanded. And that's the difference between leadership and tyranny." Across the cafe, someone whispered, "He's got him." Another voice, "Sure." He's still reaching for something. And he was. Briggs's hand was now just above his weapon. Malcolm saw it. So did the phones. So did the trembling waitress near the counter. And then, like a pressure valve bursting, the silence cracked. "Hey, easy," came a voice from a nearby table. Don't escalate this, Chief," someone else said, standing halfway with his palms out. Briggs turned, eyes wild. "Sit down, all of you." But it was too late. The energy had changed again. What had once been quiet tension was now fear. And Malcolm could feel it rising around him. Thick, electric, volatile. So he did the one thing he knew would hold it in place. He didn't move. He didn't react. He simply said, "You're unraveling, Chief. You need to walk away." Briggs laughed, sharp and breathless. "Walk away," he repeated. "You think I'm going to back down from some has been? You think I care about your little stories and old ribbons?" Malcolm stepped closer, voice low now, measured, quiet enough to force Briggs to lean in. You don't have to care about me, but you should care about the people filming you, about the badge you're about to disgrace, about your daughter, if you have one, your legacy, the difference between being remembered for courage or condemned for cowardice. Briggs's lips trembled, his fingers danced, and then he reached, not fully, not yet, but enough to send a ripple through the room like a lightning strike. Chairs scraped backward. A woman near the window knocked over a coffee, and Devin, wide-eyed, dropped a ceramic plate that shattered across the tile. Still, Malcolm didn't blink. He raised one hand, not in surrender, but in calm. "Don't," he said, not shouted, just a word, a command. "Don't make this your line." Briggs stood frozen, trembling with the rage of a man unraveling in real time. But it wasn't just his rage now. It was fear and shame, and the dawning realization that this moment, the one he thought he controlled, had already slipped from his grasp. Malcolm didn't press further. He didn't threaten or curse. He just let the silence fill the room again, this time with truth. "You don't know who I am," Malcolm said, eyes locked on the man in front of him. "But you're about to find out." And that's when the voice came from the back of the cafe. Confident, clear, "I do know who you are." The entire room turned. A man in his 30s stood near the entrance, sleeves rolled up, a service tattoo visible beneath his arm. "I served under him," he said. "That's General Malcolm Reed, United States Army. And if you lay one hand on him, you're not just making a mistake." He stepped forward. "You're making national news." Briggs blinked, and for the first time, doubt took root in his eyes. Man's words hung in the air like a thunderclap that hadn't quite hit the ground. "That's General Malcolm Reed, and if you lay one hand on him, you're not just making a mistake, you're making national news." For a moment, Chief Ronan Briggs didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. He stood frozen, one hand hovering inches from his holster, the other clenched into a shaking fist. His mind, once so certain of dominance, now scrambled for solid ground. But there was none. Not anymore. Too many eyes. Too many phones. Too much truth. The man who had spoken stepped forward with quiet authority. Early 30s, clean-cut, jaw firm. A faint scar traced his cheekbone, a story in itself. On his forearm, visible beneath the cuff of his t-shirt, a tattoo read, 3rd Battalion, Iraq, 2010. "I know him," he said again, voice calmer now. "I was there when we lost 3 men outside Kandahar. He kept us alive. He doesn't rattle. And if he's standing still, it's because he's giving you a chance to back away." The room exhaled. Chairs shifted. Forks clinked gently back onto plates. But no one spoke. No one moved. Briggs's mouth twitched. He looked at the man, then back at Malcolm, and for the first time since walking in, something cracked behind his eyes, fear. Not of Malcolm. Of the mirror being held up to him. Malcolm, still standing tall, didn't speak yet. He just watched, waiting, measuring. Briggs turned his head slowly, and that's when he saw it. The sea of cameras. Phones lifted. Red recording dots glowing. Some live, some just capturing. All watching. And that was when he realized the truth. This wasn't just a room anymore. It was a courtroom, and the jury was already seated. "You think this is how it ends for me?" He barked suddenly, though his voice cracked at the edge. "No," Malcolm said quietly. "I think this is how it begins." Briggs scoffed, tried to laugh, but the sound came out hollow. "You think people are going to believe your calm voice and old medals over the badge I wear?" Malcolm stepped forward, not fast, not threateningly, but deliberately, until they stood only inches apart. "I don't think they have to choose," he said. "Because your badge means nothing when your hands reach for violence and your voice speaks only pride." Another phone lifted. Someone near the kitchen whispered, "It's being streamed. Look, over 40,000 people already." Briggs heard it, and suddenly, it wasn't about Malcolm anymore. It was about legacy. It was about fear. It was about the sound of his career unraveling like thread. He turned sharply to face the room, put the phones down, This is an active law enforcement situation. Then act like it. Someone called from a booth. The words pierced like a blade. Briggs spun around, and that's when it happened. He snapped. His hand shot toward his belt. Not for his radio. Not for his cuffs. For his weapon. And in an instant, the cafe descended into chaos, screams, chairs crashing. A tray of dishes shattered against the tile. Elisa, the elderly hostess, dug behind the counter, pulling a couple down with her. Devin, barely 20, hit the ground so hard his knees scraped blood across the tile. A woman grabbed her toddler and hid under the table. But in the eye of the storm, Malcolm didn't move. The barrel of the weapon now hovered just inches from his chest. Not a threat, a promise. Malcolm's face didn't contort. His breath didn't quicken. He simply looked at Briggs, right into him, and said, "Put it down." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be, because in that moment, the room wasn't reacting to the gun. It was reacting to the silence standing in front of it, to the man who had faced real death and returned home with his integrity intact. Briggs's hand trembled. "Don't push me," he muttered. "You've already pushed yourself," Malcolm said. "Now you're just falling." Behind him, the veteran in the hoodie stepped forward again. "You're being streamed from 4 angles," he said, voice urgent. "You draw that weapon, and you don't just lose your badge. You lose everything." Briggs's eyes darted to the windows. Cars had stopped outside. People were watching, some filming through the glass. Malcolm's voice dropped again, this time almost like a father speaking to a child who's holding a match too close to the fuel. "You pull that trigger," he said, "and in less than 10 seconds, you'll hear sirens you can't call off. You'll see a city you used to run turn its back." Briggs's lip curled, torn between rage and ruin. "You don't scare me," he hissed. "It's not fear that should guide you," Malcolm said. "It's the question you'll have to answer tomorrow. To your wife, your children, to your own reflection." The gun wavered, just a little. Then a voice, crackling, came from Briggs's radio, loud enough for all to hear. "All units, we have multiple 911 reports from Baystone Cafe. Chief Briggs, stand down immediately. Repeat, stand down. You are being recorded. Step back now." Briggs blinked, the words hitting like bricks. "Stand down. You are being recorded. Step back now." His hand shook violently. Malcolm didn't speak. He just watched. Then, slowly, painfully, Briggs's arm began to fall. The barrel of the gun dipped toward the floor, and the weight of every decision he had made caught up with him in an instant. His shoulders sagged. His breath trembled. And as the room began to breathe again, Malcolm gently lifted one hand and pushed the barrel completely downward until it was no longer pointing at anything but the cold tile. Phones caught every second. Some people cried. Others stood still, shaking, stunned, grateful. Malcolm stepped back, then said the words that would echo far beyond that cafe. Someone called the mayor and the state attorney. And someone did. It wasn't the gun being lowered that shifted the room. It was the sound of hope returning. Soft, shaky, like the first breath after almost drowning. A woman near the entrance clutched her child and whispered, "Thank God." A glass rolled across the floor and clinked gently into the base of the table. And Malcolm Reed, stone still, shoulders square, finally exhaled. It wasn't relief. It was release. The kind that only comes when you've stood at the edge and chosen to keep your feet planted. Chief Ronan Briggs, meanwhile, stood frozen in his own body, still gripping the weapon, still blinking in the face of a reality he hadn't prepared for. He hadn't expected to be stopped. He hadn't expected to be recorded. He hadn't expected to be undone by silence. The cafe wasn't a room anymore. It was a reckoning. And just when it seemed the weight might settle, the front door opened again. It creaked just slightly, and then in walked 2 plainclothes officers, badges around their necks, flanking a state trooper in full uniform. The trooper's voice was cool, professional, measured. "Chief Briggs," he said, "hand over your weapon." Briggs didn't move at first. His grip tightened. His eyes flicked between the officers, between the crowd still filming, and finally landed back on Malcolm. But Malcolm didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He simply stood tall, the quiet example of everything Briggs wasn't. The trooper stepped forward. "Don't make us repeat it, sir." Briggs finally blinked. His hand, slow and reluctant, loosened on the handle. The pistol slipped from his fingers, and the trooper took it without ceremony. No drama, no cuffs. Just a silent transfer of a man's power, stripped from him without force, only consequence. "Sir," the trooper said, turning to Malcolm, "are you all right?" Malcolm gave a single nod. "I'm fine," he said, "but I think your city's about to have one hell of a press conference." The trooper cracked the faintest smile. "Yes, sir, I believe it is." Briggs didn't speak again. He didn't plead or protest. He simply stood there, breathing hard, eyes darting between the faces that had once feared him and now pitted him. The cafe began to stir again, carefully. Devon, still crouched near the counter, rose on shaky legs and began picking up shards of broken plate. Tasha, white-knuckled and tearful, whispered a quiet thank you to Malcolm as she passed with a broom. And in the far booth, the young veteran turned off his live stream. The final viewer count had passed 71,000. No one applauded. No one cheered. Because what they had just witnessed wasn't victory. It was exposure, and it stung. Malcolm sat back down slowly. A new glass of sweet tea was placed in front of him by a trembling hand. "On the house," the manager whispered. Malcolm nodded, appreciated. But even as the room returned to something resembling order, the air hadn't cleared. Not really. There was still a weapon-shaped hole in the middle of the story, and it wasn't going to close easily. That evening, Malcolm returned home to the quiet house at the edge of Crestfield Street. A single-story brick ranch with a weathered mailbox and magnolias planted out front. He didn't turn on the television. He didn't check his phone. Instead, he poured a cup of black coffee, sat in the armchair by the window, and stared at the street as the sun lowered behind the rooftops. And then the phone began to ring. First it was a city reporter, voicemail, then a retired colonel from his academy days, then someone from a civil liberties organization. He ignored them all, not out of arrogance, but because Malcolm Reed had learned long ago that the first voices after storm are always the loudest, but not always the most helpful. Instead, he sat quietly, the coffee cooling in his hand, thinking, not about what had happened, but about what might have, about what one wrong move could have cost him. Not his reputation, not his comfort, his life, and not just his. The cafe was full of civilians, young people, an elderly couple, a mother with her daughter. If Briggs had pulled that trigger, the damage wouldn't have ended with Malcolm. It would have fractured the city, maybe more, and that, more than anything, kept him from sleep that night. He sat long after the sky went black, listening to the creak of branches in the wind, the distant hum of late-night traffic. The only light in the room came from a small desk lamp. Beside it sat a notebook, leather-bound, scuffed at the corners. Malcolm opened it slowly and wrote just one line. "Strength isn't what you carry. It's what you refuse to put down." By morning, the world had caught up. Footage from the cafe was all over the news. Police chief draws gun in cafe confrontation with retired Army general. Calm under fire, man stands his ground with grace. Silence stronger than force. The national news cycle was relentless. Footage of Malcolm's face, unmoving and serene, filled headlines. Pundits debated the implications. Civil rights groups called for Briggs's firing. Military veterans issued public statements of support. Talk shows began booking experts to dissect the moment. But Malcolm, he watered his front lawn. He took out the trash. He answered the door once to Pastor Elijah Dorsey, who brought ribs and quiet company. "You holding up?" the pastor asked. "I'm tired," Malcolm replied, "but not shaken." The pastor nodded, placing the food on the counter. "You shook everyone else." "They needed shaking," Malcolm said. "Maybe we all did." That afternoon, his neighbor, Miss Janine, a retired schoolteacher, shuffled across the yard with her cane and left a note taped to his door. It read, "You stood tall. Now let us walk with you." And by sundown, the crowd had started to form. Not a protest, not a rally, just people. Neighbors, veterans, teachers, all standing silently at the edge of Malcolm's property. Some with candles, some with flags, some with nothing but tears in their eyes. No chants, no slogans, just presence. And as Malcolm stepped outside, they parted, making space. A single voice called out from the crowd, "We've got your back, sir." He didn't speak, didn't wave. He simply nodded. Because sometimes that's all that needs to be said. The footage hit 1 million views before midnight. By morning, it was 6. And by the time Somerset Ridge stirred to life on a gray Thursday dawn, the story had already outpaced the city that birthed it. News vans lined the curb outside Baystone Cafe, their long antennae slicing the sky like stakes in sacred ground. Reporters clustered on the sidewalk, clutching mics like weapons of truth, their breath misting in the early morning chill. Inside, the cafe remained closed, the chairs stacked, the plates untouched. The floor still bore traces of broken glass. But the moment, that unshakable, electric moment, was still alive in every whisper across town. At a bus stop, a boy scrolled the video again on his phone, showing his grandfather. He didn't even flinch, "Grandpa, look." In a classroom, a teacher paused her lesson and asked her students, "What does courage look like to you?" In a quiet corner office at City Hall, the mayor rubbed her temples as her phone vibrated nonstop. Because now it wasn't just a viral clip. It was a question, a challenge. Who do we give power to? And what do they do with it? At 10:42 a.m., the mayor's office issued a brief statement. The incident at Baystone Cafe involving Chief Ronan Briggs is under active review. The city remains committed to transparency and public trust. Further updates to follow. It was the kind of message that says nothing, yet trembles with everything it can't say. But the public had already decided. They'd seen the clip. They didn't need permission to be outraged. Outside the Somerset Ridge Police Department, a group of veterans assembled. Quiet, orderly, deliberate. No shouting, just flags. Photos of General Malcolm Reed in his younger days. In uniform, saluting, kneeling by a wounded soldier. One sign read, "He protected us." Who protects him? Another simply said, "Dismiss Briggs." The tension that once existed only in that cafe now pulsed through the city's veins. Meanwhile, Malcolm sat alone in his kitchen, stirring a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He hadn't spoken to the media. He hadn't issued a statement. He hadn't left his home since returning the evening before. Not because he was hiding, but because he was thinking, processing. He knew what was coming next. He'd seen the pattern before, in distant war zones and domestic halls alike. People would clamor for his face, for his story, for the soundbite they could spin into a headline. But Malcolm wasn't built for spectacle. He was built for substance. And that meant waiting until the noise softened, until the weight settled, until the story stopped being about shock and started being about change. A knock came at the door. Not aggressive, not urgent, just present. He opened it to find Colonel Valerie Moss standing on his porch in a navy blazer, her silver hair pinned tightly at the back of her head. She hadn't called ahead. She didn't need to. They had served together once, briefly, but meaningfully. Afghanistan, 2008. A supply convoy ambushed. She held the perimeter, while Malcolm got the wounded out. You never forget a moment like that. "Val," he said softly. "Mal," she returned, stepping inside. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. She sat at his table, folded her hands, and waited for the silence to pass. "You know this isn't going away," she said eventually. "I know. They'll ask you to speak. I'm not interested in being a mouthpiece. You don't have to be. Just be what you were in that cafe." Malcolm looked at her. Stillness doesn't play well on TV. She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time we teach them what strength really looks like." They sat in silence again, the ticking clock filling the room. Then she placed a small envelope on the table, a formal letter. From the mayor, she slid it toward him. They're asking for a statement, a testimony, something official. He didn't reach for it. "I'll think about it," he said. "You already have," Valerie replied. She stood, nodded once, and walked out, leaving the envelope unopened. Across town, Chief Ronan Briggs sat behind the frosted glass of his office window, his desk clear of papers, his badge turned backward. He hadn't spoken to the press either, but he had spoken to a lawyer. The calls from city officials had stopped being polite. The union rep wouldn't return his messages. And 3 officers who used to call him sir now referred to him as that man in every department meeting. He stared at the wall, not at any picture or document, just a wall, like he could hide inside it. He had once imagined himself retiring with honors, maybe a street named after him, a plaque in the lobby. But now, he couldn't even walk past a cafe on Main Street without hearing whispers. You're the one who drew on the general. He gritted his teeth, his fingers curled into fists. But somewhere beneath the fury was shame, heavy, unrelenting. He hadn't just lost control, he'd lost himself. Later that day, Malcolm finally opened the envelope. Inside was a simple request. Mr. Reed, the Civilian Review Board will be conducting a formal public hearing regarding the incident involving Chief Briggs. We request your presence and your account. Your voice matters. Respectfully, Mayor Elena Brooks. Malcolm read it twice, then folded it gently, slid it back into the envelope, and stood. He walked to the living room, reached for the box he hadn't opened in years. Inside, his medals, his campaign pins, and a single Press American flag, folded neatly in a triangle. He pulled out his old service pen, held it in his hand, stared at it for a long time, not with pride, but with clarity. Then he whispered aloud to no one, "It's time." It was the kind of day cities don't forget, not because of fire or tragedy, but because something quieter had broken open, a silence that had lasted too long, a truth that finally refused to stay buried. At 9 a.m. sharp, the Municipal Auditorium of Somerset Ridge opened its doors to a line that wrapped around the block. Teachers, veterans, journalists, young men in hoodies, elderly women with church fans. Everyone came, some in hope, some in anger, all in expectation. Because today wasn't about politics. Today was about character. Inside, rows of folding chairs stretched toward a long oak bench at the front of the room, where the Civilian Review Board sat. 6 members in dark suits, their faces solemn. Cameras lined the walls. Local news crews whispered instructions to interns. A court artist, not usually needed for city hearings, quietly sketched in charcoal from the front row. The air was thick, not with heat, but with the weight of what was to come. At exactly 9:27 a.m., a side door opened, and General Malcolm Reed stepped in. He wore no uniform, no medals, just a dark charcoal suit, crisply pressed, and the old service pin on his lapel, faintly worn, quietly dignified. He moved slowly, deliberately, his presence somehow louder than any sound in the room. The entire audience rose, not at once, but like a ripple, a standing ovation without claps. Just reverence, just stillness. Malcolm nodded once, not as a celebrity, not as a hero, but as a man returning to duty. He took his seat in the front row, between Colonel Valerie Moss and Pastor Elijah Dorsey. The chairwoman of the board, Dr. Lorraine Hart, cleared her throat. "This hearing," she said, "is in response to the events of 3 days ago at Baystone Cafe, where a seated civilian, General Malcolm Reed, was approached by Somerset Ridge Police Chief Ronan Briggs. The incident escalated to a level that demands public accountability. The words were read like a script, but no one in the room missed their meaning. This wasn't just a hearing. It was an unmasking. Chief Ronan Briggs sat at the far end of the room. No badge, no gun, no uniform, just a wrinkled gray blazer, a pale blue shirt, and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Briggs's eyes were bloodshot. His posture was slumped. He didn't scan the room, didn't meet eyes. He just stared forward like a man waiting to be erased. The chairwoman nodded to the staff. "Play the footage." And they did. 4 angles. No edits. No commentary. The cafe reappeared on projector, bright and warm, peaceful. Then came Briggs. Then came the approach. The slamming of the table. the weapon, the command, and Malcolm's stillness, immovable, unshaken. The gasp in the room came when the gun appeared on screen, its barrel aligned with Malcolm's chest. You could feel the temperature drop. Mothers held their breath. A man in uniform tightened his jaw. One teenager wiped tears from her eyes without even realizing. When the video ended, the silence that followed was like standing inside a church made of glass. Dr. Hart took a breath. We will now hear from General Reed. Malcolm stood. His walk to the stand was not dramatic. It was deliberate, each step like a heartbeat. He placed one hand on the table, took his seat, and looked straight ahead. The chairwoman gave a soft nod. General Reed, please, in your own words, tell us what happened. Malcolm's voice came low, calm, but clear. I walked into a cafe to have lunch, he began. Nothing more. I didn't demand anything. I didn't provoke anyone. I accepted the seat I was offered. His hands were folded, fingers interlocked. What happened next, he continued, wasn't about seating. It wasn't about policy. It was about power and the way some men mistake it for privilege. He turned slightly, scanning the room. What escalated that day wasn't me. It was entitlement. A man saw someone he didn't expect and tried to make him small. He paused. But I've spent too much of my life earning stillness. So I sat, and I stayed, not to make a scene, but to protect the peace that I and many others fought for. No notes, no script, just truth. And when the weapon was drawn, he said, voice heavier now, I didn't move, because I knew if I did, if I twitched, shouted, or reached, I might not be standing here now. Gasps echoed again. He looked at the board. You asked if I felt threatened. Yes, but I felt threatened before. What scared me more was who else might have been hurt that day if one man's pride had turned into a bullet. He nodded. That's all. The room didn't clap. It didn't need to. Silence did the work. Briggs's lawyer attempted to respond. He spoke of misunderstandings, of poor communication, of a chief under stress. But the words landed hollow. No one bought it, not even Briggs. The board recessed for deliberation. Malcolm returned to his seat and folded his hands again. Valerie leaned toward him. That was the finest testimony I've seen. I hope it matters, he whispered. 42 minutes later, the board returned. Dr. Hart read the findings aloud. Chief Ronan Briggs acted in violation of departmental protocol, use of force policy, and the ethical standards of his office. His conduct endangered civilians, undermined public trust, and demonstrated a fundamental failure of judgment. The board recommends that he be permanently barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity within this state. Furthermore, the findings will be forwarded to the state attorney's office for criminal review. The room held its breath. Briggs didn't move, didn't speak. His lawyer closed the file and stood. Malcolm stood, too, but he didn't look at Briggs. He just turned, placed his hand on Valerie's shoulder, and walked toward the doors. Outside, a soft wind had begun to blow. People waited on the courthouse steps. They didn't scream. They didn't chant. But as Malcolm Reed appeared, they clapped. Slow, measured, not for victory, for dignity. And as Malcolm stepped into the light, he did something no one expected. He placed his hand over his chest, over that old worn service pin, and he nodded. Not for them, but for every man and woman who had ever stood their ground not with fists, but with faith. The days after the hearing felt different. The tension that had gripped Somerset Ridge didn't vanish, but it softened, like the smell of smoke after the fire's been put out. Still present, still heavy, but no longer dangerous. Shops opened again. Children played. People exhaled for the first time in weeks. But there was something else now. Something deeper, running under the surface of the city's calm. Awareness. It was in the way people glanced at patrol cars a little longer, in the silence that followed every mention of the word chief, in the new understanding that not all power was Badgewell, and not all strength needed one. At Baystone Cafe, business resumed slowly. The shattered dishes had been swept, the overturned chairs set upright, but the window seat remained untouched, not out of fear, but respect. A small brass plaque had been installed beneath the window. Here sat a man who taught us that dignity does not flinch. Meanwhile, Malcolm stayed quiet, not out of exhaustion, though it pressed on him like a weighted coat, but because he knew that now was the most dangerous time. Not when the gun was drawn, not when the hearing was live. Now, when the headlines began to shape the narrative, when the world rushed to decide who he was. Hero, veteran, symbol, disruptor, target. Everyone had a label, but Malcolm, he just wanted a cup of coffee and a quiet porch. That morning, he poured it slowly, black, bitter, exactly how he liked it, and walked barefoot across the cool tile of his kitchen toward the front window. The street outside was calm. The magnolia tree leaned gently in the wind, but parked just down the road, partially hidden behind a delivery van, was a dark sedan with tinted windows. It was the third time in 4 days. The engine never turned off. No one ever got out. And Malcolm had learned long ago that coincidence is never this patient. He sipped his coffee, eyes on the car. He didn't feel fear. He felt certainty. He knew Ronan Briggs hadn't let this go. Men like Briggs didn't lose gracefully. They didn't disappear. They plotted. They simmered. Malcolm had seen it in war zones. And now, he was seeing it on American soil. Across town, Briggs sat in the back of a friend's garage. Half-empty whiskey bottle on the floor. His uniform folded in a dusty box, untouched. His world had shrunk. The friends who once shook his hand now ignored his calls. His lawyer had gone quiet. His daughter hadn't answered his texts in 3 days. And the worst part? He blamed Malcolm. In his mind, he wasn't the man who threatened. He was the man who got trapped. On camera. In public. In shame. The truth had never quite landed for him. All he saw was what he had lost. The badge. The authority. The city's fear. And slowly, something darker was rising in him. Something sharp and reckless. Back at Malcolm's house, the mail arrived. Letters. Dozens of them. Cards from strangers in other cities. Emails from veterans. Invites to speak. Foundations wanted a partner. One envelope had no return address. Just the words written in shaky, looping handwriting. You gave me my voice back. He read each one. Slowly. Carefully. He wasn't flattered. He was burdened. Because every letter came with an unspoken request. Lead. Not in politics. Not with a microphone. But with presence. With character. And that kind of leadership was the heaviest of all. That evening, he met with Pastor Dorsey at the small Baptist church down on Oak Street. Not for worship. Just space. They sat in the sanctuary, quiet. The stained glass windows glowing soft orange in the dying light. People are asking what comes next, Dorsey said. I know. And they're looking to you. Malcolm exhaled. That's what scares me, he replied. Dorsey smiled, folding his hands. That's what qualifies you. They sat like that for a long time. Two old men beneath high ceilings. No choir, no ceremony. Just a weight of memory and responsibility between them. The following day, a letter from the governor arrived. Official seal. Embossed paper. A request. We would be honored if General Malcolm Reed would attend a private summit on law enforcement reform and community restoration. Your insight would be invaluable. Malcolm held the letter in his hands for a long time, then set it aside, not out of rejection, but out of caution, because this wasn't about being invited to tables. It was about deciding whether those tables had been worth building at all. Late that night, Malcolm took his usual walk, down Crestfield Street, past the school, past the empty lot where old men once played dominoes on hot summer nights. He felt the air cool on his face. He felt his knees ache slightly with each step. But mostly, he felt the watchful eyes of the city, not from windows or cars, but from memory. They were watching how he moved now, what he would say, what he wouldn't. At the corner, he paused beneath the old lamppost and looked up at the stars. He whispered aloud, "Let this moment not be wasted." And in the stillness, something stirred in his chest. Not pride, not certainty, but readiness. He didn't ask for this, but he would carry it. Not because he wanted to be a symbol, but because someone had to show what grace under fire really looked like. after the smoke clears. There are men who accept consequence, and there are men who wear like a wound that never scabs, scratching it until it bleeds into everything they touch. Ronan Briggs was the latter. Since the day the badge left his chest, he'd been spiraling, slowly, invisibly, dangerously. The city had moved on, but he hadn't. He couldn't. Every morning, he sat in the dark living room of his cousin's apartment, unshaven, unspeaking, watching the headlines that still hadn't stopped. Malcolm's testimony had been clipped, shared, remixed into inspiration. He was now called things Briggs had never heard said about himself. A man who turned tension into stillness. A mirror that exposed power. A hero without theatrics. And that burned. What infuriated him most wasn't what Malcolm did. It was that everyone saw it, and no one cared about his side anymore. So Ronan started drinking earlier, sleeping less, and thinking too much. About correction. About making someone feel what he felt. Meanwhile, Malcolm walked a quieter road. He hadn't responded to the governor's invitation yet. He still hadn't spoken to press. But something in him had shifted. He now walked with the awareness that his silence had become a voice. And it was getting louder. On the Saturday after the hearing, a town hall was held at the community center. Originally meant to be a youth mentorship event, it had quickly transformed into something else entirely. Healing after the badge, a conversation. The crowd was packed, not by force, but by hunger, for direction, for answers, for a man who hadn't shouted once, yet had somehow said everything. Malcolm stood at the front, not on a stage, just in front of a folding table. No lights, no fanfare, only presence. He looked at the faces in the room, some familiar, some not. Young men with folded arms, elders with eyes full of pain, mothers, teachers, even a few off-duty officers in plain clothes. He cleared his throat. "I didn't come here to tell you what to believe," he began. "I came to remind you that you matter, and that how people treat you isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of theirs." The room leaned forward. "I didn't stand still in that cafe because I'm fearless. I stood still because if I didn't, I might have never stood again. And not because of a bullet." He paused. "But because of what fear does to a man who lets it control him." A woman in the back wiped tears. "I'm not here to make you angry," Malcolm continued. "I'm here to remind you that your dignity, your stillness, is yours to keep. No man in uniform, no position, no title has the right to shake that from you." When he finished, the silence was reverent. Not dead, alive. And then a boy no older than 16 raised his hand. "Mr. Reed, how you stay calm when everything you want to scream?" Malcolm looked at him, long and soft. "You breathe," he said, "even if your breath is shaking, even if your heart is racing. You breathe because the man who controls his breath controls the moment." That night, as Malcolm drove home, the roads felt different, not because of traffic or noise, but because something unseen was watching him. A car had followed him from the community center. Too many turns. Too many times slowing when he slowed. When Malcolm pulled into his driveway and the sedan passed without stopping, he didn't relax. He simply memorized the license plate. Old habits never died. Inside, he poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and checked the window every 10 minutes. He didn't call the police. Didn't tell Valerie. Didn't even journal it. Because Malcolm Reed knew something was coming. He could feel it, not in fear, but in instinct. Across the city, Ronan Briggs watched his phone light up with yet another headline. Reed urged to join State Police Reform Task Force. He threw the phone across the room. Glass cracked. Silence followed. He stared at his own reflection in the dark television screen. He hated what he saw, not because it was unrecognizable, but because it was exactly who he'd become. And somewhere in that broken space between regret and rage, a thought took shape. Simple, clear, cruel. If I can't get my name back, I'll make sure he can't wear his. The next morning, Malcolm's doorbell rang. It was early. Too early. He answered in a worn gray t-shirt and flannel pants, expecting a neighbor, maybe a delivery, but it was a package. No return address. He bent slowly, picked it up, and brought it inside. Opened it. Inside, a single manila envelope. And inside that, a photograph. Old grainy, from his time overseas. It showed Malcolm, young, uniformed, kneeling over a wounded enemy soldier, gun drawn. It had been classified, buried deep. It wasn't the full story. But out of context, it looked damning. And beneath it, a typed note. Not all stillness is innocent. Malcolm sat down slowly. He looked at the photo. He remembered that day. He hadn't pulled the trigger. He had ordered a medic instead. But this photo didn't show that. This photo was a warning. And it had found him. Whoever sent it wanted him rattled, wanted him off balance. But instead, it made him stiller than ever. Because now he knew this wasn't over. The photo sat on Malcolm's coffee table all night. He didn't burn it, didn't tear it up, didn't hide it in a drawer. He left it there, exposed, under the ceiling light, like a challenge to the room itself. It wasn't the image that disturbed him. It was the intent behind it. Someone had gone digging, not just through records, but through his life, through silence, through service. And they weren't trying to shame him. They were trying to control him. But if war had taught Malcolm anything, it was this. The person who fights from fear always loses to the one who fights from truth. Still, truth had a cost. And sometimes, it came in the form of everything you never wanted the world to see. By Monday morning, the envelope had vanished from the table, folded, filed, and stored in a fireproof safe. Malcolm made no calls. He went about his day, grocery shopping, walking through Jefferson Park, even dropping by the library to return a worn-out biography. But he watched every car, every face, every unfamiliar man who stood too long at a corner. He wasn't paranoid. He was precise. At 4:14 p.m., a knock came at the door, not the doorbell. Just 3 knocks, firm-spaced. He opened to find Colonel Valerie Moss, again unannounced. Only this time, her jaw was tight, her hands clenched around a brown folder. "I just got this," she said. She walked inside and laid the folder on his dining table. Inside, the same photo, different sender, official stamp. Internal Affairs, State Division. Attached was a memo. Recent findings have prompted questions about General Malcolm Reed's past military engagements. A formal inquiry is being considered. Valerie didn't speak right away. She just stood there, watching his face, measuring his pulse through the stillness of his breath. "I didn't leak this," she said quietly. "But someone wants you off the stage." Malcolm nodded. "And they're using shadows to do it." She stepped forward. "Mal, I can fight this for you. I have contacts. I still have access to—" He raised a hand gently. "No," he said. "If this is what they're bringing, I'll meet it myself. But this is character assassination." He looked her in the eye. "That means they've run out of facts." Across the city, Ronan Briggs sat in the driver's seat of that same black sedan, watching Malcolm's house from 2 blocks away. He hadn't sent the official inquiry, but he had made a call to an old buddy in state intelligence. Just a nudge, just a name. He needed to plant the seed. He just needed someone curious enough to start watering it. And they had. He took a swig from a plastic flask, wiped his mouth, and muttered under his breath, "Stillness won't save you this time, old man." That night, Malcolm sat on his back porch, staring at the sky. The soft hum of crickets surrounded him like a slow heartbeat. His hands rested in his lap. The photo was gone. The air was thick, and inside him something stirred. Not anger, not even defiance. Something else, resolve. Because if they were willing to come for him in silence, he would answer them in clarity. He picked up his phone, called one person, not the press, not a lawyer, not even Valerie. He called Jasper Holt, a retired Army journalist turned podcaster, now one of the most respected truth-tellers online. When Jasper picked up, Malcolm simply said, "You want the whole story? Come to my house. I'm done letting other people write my chapters." By sunrise, Jasper was already there. No cameras, just a handheld recorder, a legal pad, and eyes that had seen too much of war to be distracted by fame. They sat at the kitchen table. No formal interview. Just story. Malcolm told him everything. Afghanistan. The photo. What really happened. The wounded enemy had been a teenager, strapped with suicide vest, bleeding out. Malcolm had drawn his weapon not to kill, but to buy the medic time. He had talked the boy down, disarmed him, then held pressure on the wound until help came. The image only showed the draw, not the mercy that followed. When he finished, Jasper didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "Do you want to release this?" Malcolm nodded once. "I want it told. All of it. Because silence is what lets men like Briggs rewrite truth in their own ink." 2 days later, the podcast dropped. Stillness isn't silence. The truth about Malcolm Reed. It spread like fire. Not viral for clicks. Viral because it hit a nerve the city didn't know it had. The truth didn't erase the fear, but it clarified the story. And more than that, it made people think. How many of our heroes were buried in half-truths? And how many of our villains walked free because no one spoke up? That night, Malcolm stood in front of the cafe again. Baystone. Same window. Same light. People passed him. Some nodded. Some stopped to say thank you. Some just smiled and walked on, carrying the weight of his stillness with them. Inside, a teenage girl mopped the floor. She looked up, saw him, and waved gently. He nodded back. No grand speech. No press moment. Just a man, still standing, even as the storm behind him gathered for a final strike. The podcast episode had only been out for 48 hours when the first response came. Not a press release, not a comment, but a resignation letter. It was short, cold, tucked between legal jargon and bruised ego. Effective immediately. I hereby resign from any consideration of reinstatement or appeal. R. Briggs. No apology. No explanation. But for Somerset Ridge, that single sheet of paper was enough. The man who once wielded fear like a flashlight had walked himself into the dark. But that wasn't the real justice. Justice came the next morning. A small press conference was called, not by the mayor, not by the governor, but by the Civilian Review Board. Malcolm didn't attend. He didn't need to. The chairwoman, Dr. Hart, stood at the podium with a quiet smile and a sense of purpose that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. "Today," she began, "we are announcing a new state-backed initiative, the Reed Protocol, a directive that redefines use of authority engagements, requiring full-body de-escalation review, civilian audit teams, and immediate suspension for any officer who initiates aggressive confrontation without just cause." The audience, small but tuned in, watched in silence. "This was born," she continued, "from one moment, a moment where a man stayed seated, while power stood over him shaking with rage. He didn't fight back with violence. He fought back with restraint, with history, with dignity." A young officer in the audience lowered his head. "This isn't just a new policy," she said. "It's a new standard." Meanwhile, Malcolm Reed spent the morning in his backyard, pruning tomato vines and refilling the bird bath. He had seen the headlines. He had heard the phone ring. But he had also learned some battles are not won in front of crowds. They are won when you choose peace, again and again, even when the world dares you to pick war. As he stood to stretch his back, Valerie approached from the side gate with a quiet smile and a newspaper in her hand. "Looks like you got your name back," she said. He took the paper, skimmed the headline. The stillness that changed the city. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "That's not mine to own," he said. "It belongs to everyone who finally believed they could sit down and still be seen." Across the city, Pastor Elijah Dorsey led Sunday service in a church that felt different now. Not because of decor, because of direction. The sermon wasn't about Malcolm. It wasn't about Briggs. It was about something deeper. When a man stays seated while others expect him to fall, Pastor Dorsey said, he teaches us that dignity doesn't shout. It just stands taller in silence. He paused, looking at the crowd. And sometimes, he added, justice isn't the loudest voice. It's the one that refuses to lie anymore. Later that evening, Malcolm visited Baystone Cafe once more. The light hit differently now. The space didn't feel like the scene of a confrontation. It felt like a memorial, not for pain, but for restraint. Tasha, the waitress who first sat on that day, came over with her apron wrinkled and her eyes full of meaning. "Table's yours if you want it," she said softly. Malcolm shook his head. "Let someone else sit there today. Let them feel what stillness feels like." She smiled, and for a moment, just a breath, the whole city felt quiet. Outside the cafe, a young boy in a hoodie approached him. He couldn't have been older than 13. "Sir," the boy asked, voice cracking slightly, "are you the man from the podcast?" Malcolm looked down at him. "I am." The boy swallowed. "Thank you for not yelling. My mom says that's how I should fight back, too." Malcolm knelt, so they were eye level. "Your mom is right," he said. "The strongest men are the ones who don't lose their breath when others try to take it." The boy smiled and walked away, standing just a little straighter. Somerset Ridge didn't become perfect after that. Racism didn't vanish. Ego didn't disappear. Bad men didn't stop finding their way into good uniforms. But something had changed. A window had opened. A truth had echoed. And a city had remembered what justice looked like when it stood still and refused to be moved. As you finish this story, take a moment and ask yourself, what would I have done in that cafe? Do I use my voice when silence is safer? Can I carry dignity when no one is clapping for me? Because the world doesn't just need louder voices. It needs steadier ones. If this story moved you, sparked something deep, or made you think differently, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that uncover truth, character, and the power of real justice. Like the video so others can find it. Share it with someone who needs to know. Stillness is not weakness. And most of all, leave a comment below and tell us, what does justice mean to you now? We're listening, and the story is still being written.